Welcome to my view from the piano bench. We do this on Wednesdays in the evening, typically, on my Joel Knows YouTube channel. In addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evening. Thank you to those of you who support and encourage me via the links you'll find on the support page of my website, and you'll see a link to that page in the video description below. Thank you for your support, and thank you for those of you who have not checked it out for considering if you do. And that in effect sponsors these videos. And on Wednesdays I move the phone camera a little bit closer to the piano so I don't feel I have to shout and you don't really see the keys, but it's less relevant on Wednesday night. Maybe slightly more relevant tonight, but it'll be fine. So every Wednesday night I come up with a topic, and the topic often has to do with what I'm discovering, and in sharing it with you, it helps me to further explore it. You know, it's a funny thing when you hear yourself say something that you're working out in your mind, but you haven't heard it actually expressed verbally. It helps you to process it. So this is helpful to me, but in the same, at the same time, I hope you find these explorations interesting. And I know that some of you provide me with nice, encouraging feedback, which I appreciate. So I had a bit of an epiphany yesterday. Had a gig with Sharon, and the gig wasn't yesterday, but yesterday thinking about it, and I had a typical experience of needing to come up with a groove or a feel for a tune, having really no idea what was called for, and feeling my way to it. You know, and a couple of times when this has happened, you know, Sharon has been surprised that I made my way there, you know, quickly and, you know, effectively enough, you know, given that those particular grooves, more contemporary grooves, are not where I live. And I've said a lot of things about that. One of them being the swing era, the older style things, are just kind of where my heart pulls me. But that doesn't mean if I get myself familiar with other spaces that I can't find them as well. I may not feel them as deeply. Maybe if I lived there for 20, 30, 40 years, in large measure, I would. You know, or however long I've been living in the swing thing, which is longer than 40 years. And it's sort of an established thing. But it got me thinking about how I process things, and then I moved it over to melody and harmony. And I've had a lot of things to say about that, mostly in terms of like how I don't process things and how it's not an intellectual pursuit. And, you know, jazz for me is not something I can think about or process formulaically. I just can't get there. You know, and it's a lot of sort of like glass half empty speak. And it dawned on me, you know, my process there is exactly the same as the other, feel and find. But I think I've identified a little bit how that works. So I'm calling this melodies and grooves. And let's see what happens. Now, and a groove, of course, can be anything. And I love that swing groove. Or, as in the case of a tune that Sharon wanted to do the other night, and now I forget exactly what the groove was. It's kind of helping me make my point. I forget what the tune was. But she said two things together that confused me. She said swinging backbeat. And Sharon and I were, I think, operating in two different definitions of the word swing at that point. And for me, and there is an intellectual basis to it, where it is how you divide the eighth note, that swing, you know. If the eighth notes are even, that's not swing. The eighth notes are uneven, triplet-esque, but not really a triplet. It just felt, you know, this tug and pull back and forth. Of course, that happens so quick you might not notice, but if I see now, I can't pretend to swing and not swing. So I got to give myself a straight eighth feel. Now you might think the difference is really subtle between those two. Or you may think, wow, there's a big difference. Depends on what angle you're looking at it. But it is a fundamental difference in structure between how the eighth notes are divided. You know, it's like what we call duple and triple meter in classical music, similar to that. The beat's divided into two parts. Or triple meter, the beat's divided into three parts. Notice the speed of the beat stayed the same. Right? So the difference in how you divide the beat affects everything that rides on top of that and affects the whole delivery and everything. So it's a very foundational distinction. So I'm thinking to myself, backbeat, swing, shuffle, no. And then I'm thinking, I don't think Sharon means swing in that way. And I don't know exactly what I did, but it was some version. And of course, if I'm just playing solo piano, it's kind of a breeze because I don't have to get into somebody else's feel. I don't have to come up with this, what's going on. I can just like take it from inside and stick it out there. Really, really comfortable. And I know that about myself. But Sharon kept coming back to, afterward, that, you know, my initial response to what she said was, I don't know what that means. Got to figure that out. And then, like, almost immediately, or very soon thereafter, I fall into the groove she wants to hear. You know, and a groove that she enjoyed. But that's my process, and I couldn't tell you what it's called. I could intellectually flush it out if I needed to, but it's not my path to it. Understanding it's not my path. Feeling it is my path. And I could keep talking about this, and maybe I'll come back to it. But let me make the broader point right now that in a specific manner that I relate to melodies and chords, I realize it's the same thing. And this is really going to help me to talk about it, probably to teach it more effectively, and just to further be in command of my own process. Now, when you're talking about harmony, I should have picked a tune ahead of time. And I want to play Winter Wonderland, which It's okay now because it's after Thanksgiving, but you could watch this any time of year and probably be annoyed it's a Christmas tune. Right? Now, typically what people do, musicians will do when they're playing and not reading music notes, they'll have a sense of a harmony. They'll know what the chord changes are. And if I think about them, see, A7, D minor 7, G7, and then I get to a bunch of different things here. B7, E7, A7, they're altered, and D7, or, that's terrible. Some alteration there. And you take those chords and then you do stuff with them. But then describing what you do with those chords is really difficult. And I did come up with another title and topic, which I'm going to do soon enough, which is my sort of next level of teaching chords and harmony. I've been poking at this, and now it's like, you know what? This is what it needs to be, but I'll get there later. So I'm talking about my approach to harmony and chords, which is to not think about them, but to have instead a continual relationship with the melody of the tune. And you've heard me say that, or if you watch these, you've heard me say at some point that if I'm lost in a tune, if I'm not sure what comes next, I go back and find the melody. And that melody grounds me and tells me where the harmony goes. So I'm always tethered to the melody of the song. The melody of the song gives you the groove of the harmony. And it's something you fall into once you're connected with it. So for me, that's something that I feel not just time-wise, tap your foot groove rhythm section wise, but also harmonically. Having to do with tension and release that I talk about, which would be the analysis of it. And you can hear, yeah. You can hear the resolution, right? Whew. Right? But the whole thing creates a shape. And it's not about any one point in it. It's the overall arc. And then little things that happen during that arc. And in the similar way that if somebody says bossa nova, I might think Girl from Ipanema. But then apply it to whatever tune it's called for, like what's the tune? Helps if I know it. It's funny, I got caught up in my own process. So let's take that tune. Which actually does require me to think a little bit. Because it is it's sort of an unusual place you go, so I have to sort of point myself there and then I'm good. course, I'm still doing the bossa nova there. I kind of swing. Let's stop there. Awkward stop. So if you take away the melody, and you have me just try to play something detached from the melody, I'll try to remember it. But I'm still guided by this. And maybe that's just too esoteric to talk about, and maybe I don't have it completely formulated yet. In fact, I know I don't. But the point is that I think any tune is just one big feel, just like any rhythm is one big feel. And the touch point of the feel of the harmony is the melody. And this is where I think the real fork in the road exists between traditionally minded improvisation or jazz and current or contemporary jazz, where there isn't necessarily a fixed harmonic feel. In fact, the objective in many of the circumstances and approaches and mindsets is to reinvent the harmonic feel. In other words, to go in and change up what to me is foundational. And there was a tune we played at a Stanford Grill gig. One that required me, and I can't remember what it is. Oh. Lover. But instead of doing it in the swing, Scott played it in 3/4. And I realized when I was soloing on it that I had to think about it, because it's descending 2 5s. It's actually something, I guess if I did it a lot, I wouldn't think about it at all. But it was like it required me, because there's so much movement happens so quickly. It's kind of like trying to practice giant steps. You can't just feel giant steps. Etc. Do it right. The whole thing about giant steps is played like 5 times as fast, and it becomes a cerebrally focused thing. And it's like the longer I get into this feel place, the deeper I get with it in general, just in my own expression overall, the more disconcerting having to think while I play is. The more it throws me, the more I'm out of balance. So, like, one of the things I could practice to, one of the 50 million things, I'm always choosing new things, is take this tune Lover. Actually already slightly better in terms of feeling my way to it. uh, and practicing toward whatever that feeling is. Now, if you're going to ask me to define that in terms of melodies, I can't tell you yet. I'm figuring it out. But there's a certain essence to anything, including descending two fives. The perpetual, this is the song that never ends, Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop. Because you can just take this kind of tension, resolving into other tension. Right? Or wait a minute. Back where I started, and I finally had to play something to make it stop. So. Am I using theoretical concepts that I'm consciously aware of? Yeah. But I'm arriving at them through a connection to the feel of the melody. Something like that. Now, in the contemporary jazz sense, most any pianist would have taken much more harmonic liberties by moving tonal centers and making intellectual decisions and all of that. And the melody tethers me, but not in a bad way for me. The melody keeps me playing the tune. And the tune is not restraining me. The tune is enabling me. The tune is giving me a house to walk around in, and to some extent rearrange the furniture, as opposed to, in like crazy reharmonization, rearranging the house by taking the house apart and putting it back together sideways. You know, which, by the way, when you do that, it will leak when it rains. So, I don't know if I've described well or not, but I made an attempt of equating an understanding that I'm going to keep trying to develop of how I relate to harmony with how I relate to time feels. And hopefully those of you who are not musicians aren't lost here. I try to, shoot on both sides. But if you have an observation, feel free to make it. Whether you're a musician or not, whether in the comments or, as many of you do, in a message to me. So let's go back to time feels and see if I can make this, if I can learn some more stuff from my own approach here. So one of the things I'll do, let's say I want to play a waltz. So I'm going to have a waltz template. I'm going to have a 3/4 tune that suggests the feel I want. I can talk about the harmony of that too, but the rhythmic feel. And of course, we call that a jazz waltz kind of feel. So if I go to another tune, like All the Things You Are, which is typically not in 3/4. 1, 2. But I want to make it in 3, a jazz waltz. I'm going to feel. To play this melody. So I could go back and forth between those two tunes, and the feel is the same. And once I have a rhythmic template that can be identified by a tune, similar to the feel to that backbeat thing, not the same. Whatever. And that becomes. So let's pick an unrelated tune. Back to Winter Wonderland. exactly the same, but pretty close. So that wasn't maybe my best illustration, but you get the thought. So let's say I want to take a tune, ha. Yeah, but I never thought of putting stride to that tune. But let's take a tune that I will do that with. Isn't she lovely? And just decide I'm going to play it like I would play it Misbehaving, you know? Yeah, right. So now let's go back to melodies. What? Well, that was interesting. I wasn't planning on that. So when I started that little funny classical thing, and then I went into whatever the tune I was just playing at the end. I don't remember what tune I morphed into already, right? But the melody itself was informing the shape of the rest of it, and I wasn't just playing chords. I was doing more of a polyphony thing. I know I started with this. Of course, now I can't play the melody right. So there, in some funny way, may be like a combination of everything I've talked about rolled into one. A rhythmic feel. Baseball season is over. Why am I playing Take Me Out to the Ball Game? So that's a waltz feel, right? What's the reference for waltz? at the same time I'm doing that, I'm thinking, and not always clear choices, or feeling harmonically what I want to do. Now, if you learn jazz or harmonization, and I would teach it this way, and I've been taught it this way, you think about like what can I do to spice it up? And this is actually not a good example because there's not much you can do. Right there, I was thinking of going to an A flat chord, but then I'm thinking, how would I get out of it? And it's like, I'm pulled out of my process. So maybe all of this to say that there are actually fixed foundational places that I need to stand, that I know the foundation will hold me up. And maybe it's like a wise man builds his house upon the rock and a foolish man builds his house upon the sand. Maybe if you were a Sunday schooler when you were a kid, a wise man built his house upon the rock. A wise man built his house upon the rock. A wise man built his house upon the rock, and then the rains came tumbling down. Hey, I just sort of sang something, sort of. But the idea is that if your house is built on the rock, then the weather conditions aren't going to make it collapse. If it's built on the sand that becomes the mud, it will collapse. I'm actually tempted to do something completely unrelated, which is sing that one little tune, some of you know it, that I recorded on my He's Stepping Out CD, which was a collection of, from back in the 90s, songs I wrote for a children's choir in the 80s and 90s. And then I recorded them later. And and that same parable became this. A man with his spouse came to build himself a house. Didn't care about the ground, he put it on. He didn't plan ahead, but built it on the sand instead. He didn't know that soon it would be gone. He never listened when they told him that the sand would never hold him in his house that he had planned for years and years. But still he was surprised the day he saw it with his eyes, when a gust of wind blew all his dreams to tears. And the walls fell down and the windows hit the ground. On the pavement they were scattered and the chandelier was shattered. What happened very suddenly was over in a wink. The table and the lamp had fallen in the kitchen sink. The bread and the butter went flying in the gutter, and the fruit and the veggies fell all over Dad and Mother. You never know that anybody lived at that address. It was just one big mess. I'm halfway done the tune, but the concept in my head, and I'm losing it. But it was something like what that's describing, that you have something that holds it up, like a serving plate, as opposed to taking the cake because you want to reinvent the cake and scooping it up with your hands and holding it in your hand and maybe doing one of these and then coming back and here's your cake. Is that harsh? No, I mean, that qualifies as art. I mean, that's an personal expression, but it's something that has a foundation that everybody can connect to, and I think that's the broader point here, and why I can't not be aware of who's in the room with me. Once I got to that epiphany back in the 90s that I've told you about, where I realized that, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for the connections that it makes with people around me. That's informed everything I've done. And so there's a tune, and there's a rhythmic feel, or there's a something. There's something that we all agree to feel, not that we all agree to think, right? And if you have something that's built on shifting sand or squished cake, it's not really going to hold up. But of course, it's like, what does it mean for it to hold up? And then there's a whole artistic, discussion about that. And it's ultimately subjective, and you don't have clear answers. But you know where I'm going, that there is this concrete thing, serving dish, that holds stuff. So let me finish the tune, the second verse. The man up the street had a house so clean and neat, 'cause it sat upon a big block of cement. He believed it when they told him that the sand would never hold him. Now a violent storm will hardly leave a dent. When Jesus gives a lesson, you had better pay attention. It's the smartest thing that you will ever do. When you build your life on Him, He's your rock and foundation, so you'll never say that this happened to you. That the walls fell down and the windows hit the ground. On the pavement they were scattered, and the chandelier was shattered. It happened very suddenly, was over in a wink. The cable and the lamp had fallen in the kitchen sink. Ew, the bread and the butter went flying in the gutter, and the fruit and the veggies fell all over Dad and Mother. You never know that anybody lived without a dress. It was just one big mess. All right, I think I taught myself something in that tune. So, when I was playing that tune, I was laying down a rhythmic groove. Which is like a derivative of a bossa nova, but not really. And I don't know what you call these different Latin-based or straight eighth groups. Yeah, but you could, I guess, superimpose Girl from Ipanema and a man with a spouse can build himself a house. Why not? But there's also now what I'm feeling harmonically because of the melody. And I will say, if you are playing piano and accompanying yourself singing or accompanying somebody else singing, it makes the playing really easy because you don't have to concern yourself with the melody. But I don't know if my right hand was even visible here, but you could hear it if you go back and listen to it. My right hand was pretty much all what they call leading tones. It was just notes. I even know what I did now. It's also weird not having a melody to accompany. It was sort of in my head, but I was also sort of thinking about it. But I don't want to sing anymore because I want to keep my job. Suddenly was over in a wink. The table and the lamp had fallen in the kitchen sink, and I can't sing worth a dime. So that's all of that. but it's very interesting for me to explore this. So let's take a, let me see. Yeah. Yeah, a little simple tune. So interesting what happened there. I was comfortable enough that I laid down the groove, and if you notice, and you can go back and listen to it, I actually allowed the presentation of the groove to turn a little sideways and the melody to wander off into its own cornfield away from the groove while everything was still connected, and it came back together. So that's like a good example of how I would approach a groove, as opposed to, this note lines up with this and this note lines up with this, and if you get all that lined up right, then it's going to feel like this. The music goes round and around, whoa, 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 and it falls flat on the floor because I can't do it that way. I have to feel it. You see, what did I do? I did a stride, right? Now, interesting, I chose to do it that way, and I guess that was deliberate because that's a tune at Christmas time that I'll play with like a I don't know, Caribbean, Latin, some kind of feel. Where'd that come from? Anyway, and I like that feel. And I like that feel too. And while I'm playing that feel, I'm also having the melody be a foundation, just like there's a rhythmic foundation. Even if I never play the melody. And as everything I do does, I sped up somewhat, which is something I'm practicing toward. I'm putting some, as of this morning actually, it's putting some renewed attention to that. And maybe I can explain how at some point that I do that. Or try to accomplish it. So I had those dual things going on. the rhythmic feel, and the harmonic feel. And I'm going to continue to explore the idea of harmony being something felt or experienced, which of course it is, but living in the feeling and experience as opposed to living in the I'm playing this chord, I'm playing this chord, I'm playing this chord, I'm playing this chord. Which will inform maybe the next week's episode of this, when I talk about how I've been reinventing my approach to teaching chords. And when I started doing it, I was met with some academic resistance, which kind of suggested to me I was going in the right direction. But anyway, it's all like feel and find, right? Not quite the way my mother described her an approach to typing, not hers. On a typewriter now. The Columbus system. Look and land. That would be me. So let's just feel it. Right now the groove is kind of all floaty. But what you're feeling in addition, the very, very, very stretchable groove is the harmonic and melodic groove. Intellectual part. Unnecessary insert. Ah! All right. Maybe that gave you something to think about, while I purposed to give myself something to think about, which I think I did. It's all about being in the moment. So this coming, 2 nights from when you see this, at the Mainstay, I'm going to have my final First Friday concert of this year. If you're watching this later, it would be December 1st, 2023 that this happens. And you can go to the Mainstay live streams website and look up, I think the directors decided to call this as Almost Christmas Charlie Brown. And I was calling it a tribute to Vince Guaraldi, or the music of a Charlie Brown Christmas, or something like that. And interesting lead up to the show, where the drummer that I hired for this gig, he lives locally while he has connections in a much bigger market as well. So he lives in multiple places. And I sort of knew this, but I've never actually worked directly with him, where his approach is very, very cerebral. And and that's what's going to get him to his destination. And like really studying the original tune to see what the original drummers exactly did, so he could do exactly that, and then he could depart if he wants to. But me, it's just like, what's it feel like? There's even something that doesn't have a defined rhythmic thing, although that was rhythmically together. It still feels like something, right? And a lot of those tunes are just, to me, and in my email exchange with the drummer, he's not entirely agreeing with me, which is great. It's his process. But me, it's just like finding that moment space. The groove of the rhythm. And the groove of the melody. Yeah. For what it's worth. So welcome to my crazy brain. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow night for Piano for My Friends. Thanks for being here. That was noisy.